Yeah, it works. Yes. Yeah, maybe we don't need it. Yeah, if you just sit with it. Okay. Yes. Hi everyone and welcome. My name is Aurora. I'm an activist and organizer in Elokapina. It's really good to see all of you here tonight. Firstly, I want to say a big thank you to Mira and Tekstin for letting us use this space. And I also heard that there's a bar on the other side, and if you want to buy drinks, you can also drink them here. It was nice to know. But yeah, also thank you to everyone who came, and especially like outside of Elokapina, like other activist movements, because as we all know, this is not just about climate, it's about having a future for all of us. Yeah, I have to say that I'm very excited about tonight, because when I first read All In, I felt a sense of excitement that I haven't felt in a while, because it really worded what I've been feeling for a while, and that I think many other activists also have felt. And it's that like there is this contradiction with what we know and what we demand or how we're acting. Yeah, and just how we get out of it together. But another thing is a friend of mine called this book TikTok Theory. And I hope it's not rude. I thought it as a positive thing because I think it tells that the book was clear and doesn't get too lost in like theory and nuance, but it just like says how it is, and I thought that was really refreshing. So yeah, one of the people behind much of that spirit is Sinan Eden. He's an activist and organizer with a deep taste for dialectics, and by his own words, probably too many meanings behind him, which I think we can all relate to here. So yeah, he's been part of student anti-austerity and climate movements in Turkey and Portugal, working across Marxist, anarchist, and grassroots traditions, and is now active in Klimaksimo, helping connect and train movements internationally. So tonight, Sinan will introduce the book All In, a Revolutionary Theory to Stop Climate Collapse. And after the talk, we'll have time for questions and discussion. And if you would like to buy the book, you can do that here, cash, or then if you don't have cash, then we can fix mobile pay. And yeah, minimum 10 euros if you have it, but if you're rich, you have to pay more. Yeah, that's it. Thank you, Sinan Eden.
Thanks. I didn't know about that TikTok thing. I know nobody in the book project that actually has a TikTok account even, so it's okay. So it's okay. I think you're doing something like you're catching up with. I mean, I definitely don't have even. Yeah. So this is not a talk. I mean, okay. This is not a book launch because the book is launched, so you can go home. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And I mean, I'm not going to tell you what's in the book because it's already written in the book. So what I can do instead is to share a bit with you where I'm coming from, where the book is coming from, and where I'm coming from. And if that kind of makes sense to you, and then we can talk about that. And then eventually you may decide that actually it's worth having a read for the book. So it's a bit of a strange situation because we are organizers and we're not authors, so we don't know how to do these kind of book presentation stuff. But also because like I feel like this spoiler effect, you know, like why am I going to tell you anything inside the book? Because then you wouldn't, you know. So what I'm going to do now is just I'm going to give you a bit of like an introduction of where I'm coming from and how does that connect to the book, and then I'll just pass the ball to you to see what's alive in you, and then we roll it from there. So where I'm coming from is that so Sinan is a Turkish name. I was born and grew up in Turkey, then I moved to Portugal, So now I'm in Portugal. I have a PhD in math that I'm not using. I have been involved in a bunch of stuff in terms of social movements. Oh wow, I should be doing this, no? Is this better for you or is it worse for you? Wow, I hadn't noticed. So I was in the student movement when I was a student. That was a while ago. In Turkey, in 2000s, there was a movement that I would consider a secularist movement. When you are in Europe, it looks like pro-democracy. That's how Europeans tend to call that. But we used to call it secularist movement. So there was that. Then I went to Portugal in 2011. Some of you may have age to remember that that's the anti-austerity movement. With the economic crisis, I was also involved in that kind of stuff, in different degrees, in different organizations. Some of them are already named. So there's that. And there's also the fact that at some point in 2007, I went to some sort of activist school of some sort about climate. So that's when somebody told me about climate change. And so that was 2007. I was like 21. Yeah. And since then, I didn't recover from that information either. So it's a bit of all of these things is where I'm coming from. But there's another place that I'm coming from, which is I'm very much interested in winning. And this is relevant particularly for people who have been paying attention to climate stuff, which is that if you don't win, there's a big price to pay, attached to that not winning. But specifically on my side, so between 2011 and 2013, there were mass movements where in Southern Europe they were called Indignados movement, but it was the square occupation movements. There was a point that we put 1 million people to the street in Portugal of 10 million people. So for some of you, this 10% might mean something. And then we sent them back home. But there was regular, like every week, I was aware of like two protests, 2 actions taking place for more than a year. And it was very confusing to me how we made one protest, single day, 500,000 people in Lisbon, in the same square, and then we made a rally. And then we said, there's the next protest 3 months from... And I was a bit confused about that. I wasn't in the platform, but I was like, I thought these people knew what they were doing, and it doesn't seem... And 3 months after that, started a massive wave of protests in Istanbul. 2013, there's a park in the center of Istanbul. The government decided to turn it into a shopping mall, and somehow that became the tipping point for everyone to synchronize and come to the streets. And of course, it stopped being about the park. It's like that trigger moment has nothing to do with what follows. But there was an occupation that lasted a month. So I went there. The Ministry of Internal Affairs says that their guess is that some 6 to 8 million people in Turkey were involved in those protests across a month. So that's also 10% of people on the street doing some sort of civil disobedience. If I'm not mistaken, 80 of 81 districts came to the street on the same period, and they all occupied something. And I was there, and I was also looking at some platform where some people were talking, and then they called for a meeting. We went to the meeting, and on the moment, during the meeting, the police came and raided the park and the occupation. And I was like, okay. But then nobody really had an answer. And I was like, this is not going very well for us. Like, we don't seem to know what we're doing. So there was a point where like, no, we have to seriously think about what the hell we're doing with ourselves. So these are for in any kind of, let's say, theoretical standards, these are revolutionary situations. similar things were happening in Greece, similar things were happening in Brazil, many things happened in North Africa. So I was kind of worried about this thing of like, maybe we have to be a bit more serious about ourselves. And of course, on top of that, some of the things that you might remember about 2019 and climate mobilizations, which gave me the same sense of like, okay, good, this is building up, where are we going now, right? And in all of these things, it's not like I'm talking about someone else, like I'm always inside it somewhere. I am accountable, right? So through this process, I came to 2 conclusions, and I don't think I came to these conclusions alone. I think it was like there was an awakening of some sorts. One of them is we understood deeply how inflexible the status quo is. They would not negotiate debt payment calendar with Greece. It's not about like whether it's illegitimate, whether there is injustice. It was really, they showed very clearly how inflexible they are. And then they did it with cops, and then they did, there are other moments where they did it as well. But understanding of like how flexible the structures are, how inflexible the structures are, puts us in a position of, okay, then we have to adjust strategies based on that, right? And the second conclusion that I reached is how complex power structures are that we are confronting. And this again, good example is Greece, because it's very well documented that you can put everyone on the street, you can win the government, you can specifically ask people if you want to pay the debt or not. They say, no, let's not pay it. But as long as Brussels says so, you don't have sovereignty about that issue. And we had the similar sense in Turkey when we had really millions of people on the street, barricades, quite clear what's going on. And we realized, like, the intuition was, as long as Germany's trade deals with the government are maintained, that government is a stable government. So we realized that we really have to handle larger power structures in order to have even local victories. And obviously for people who are doing climate stuff, like specifically climate topics, you know these things, how a bank decides basically what's going on, or if someone is controlling some funds, and that conditions everything else. So these 2 conclusions, they are like, okay, so this is really big. It's much bigger than I thought. So this was the conclusion. It's much more complex. And then, what does that mean? It means we should have a theory of change, so meaning an idea of how change will operate to go to wherever we want to go, and an organizational structure that can hold that change. So actually execute that change. What would that look like, right? So that is what we are trying to answer here. It's a very practical question in a way of like, I'm actually trying to solve a problem here, and there's that part of TikTok here, right? It's just I'm trying to get somewhere, and if I don't get an answer that is like refutable, then I'm not there yet. So I really need something that I can test, I can observe, I can refute, and change. So it's really a strategy question. And there is this part of, so that means what? So there's one thing that I noticed actually, that when we were talking about these things, so the book is a result of a talk that was designed in 2022. There were speakers and so on, and we realized that that's not a good way of doing it. So myself and Mariana sat down and wrote it up. But there is one thing that we noticed, that a lot of people were reaching these same conclusions that I said, which were, what were they? That the status quo is very inflexible, and the power structures that we are facing are very complex. So these conclusions, a lot of people were reaching in their own terms. And one of the things that we realized is when I'm talking to somebody and we reach a point when the other person says, this is a very complex issue, what they mean is, I don't want to talk about it. Because the actual adequate response is, how can I give a complex answer to this situation? Right? How can I hold complexity? How can I respond to complexity with complexity? and not simplify, not reduce, like actually hold it at that level of complexity that I recognize. So a theory of change in an organizational structure that can hold that complexity and simultaneously have a framework where we can have tough and ambitious conversations with each other. So what is the playground in which we can, when somebody comes and asks like, what about Trump? We're like, yeah, what about Trump? That's part of the equation. It's not like it's not a diversion. It's actually the topic. Yeah, it's my problem. Or somebody, like a lot of people in Portugal say, what about China? I'm like, yeah, what about China? Like, let's include, like, it is my problem to solve that. So kind of contain all of that, but then find a way of not getting just, overwhelmed and paralyzed, and somehow keep curiosity, keep engagement, keep the conversation going. So this is where the book is coming from. And for those who read the book, this is like maybe the first paragraphs of the book, right? So what we're trying to do is understand, like, what is it that we're trying to get rid of? How much time do we have? Climate science. And then, therefore, we have to find a way of doing this. So, and then we are exploring that and looking at other examples and so on. Again, we call it a book, but it's like 150 pages, drawings and everything. So it's a bit of a talk, script of a talk. So it's really, so what do we say? We say something. We say it is, it's not here. It's somewhere else. I don't remember. It's an easy read, but it's a tough read at the same time. I wanted to say it the right way. So that's me. This is where I'm coming from. And this is more or less where the book is coming from. It's just like, it's one word, one angle of how to tell this story. And I just want to leave it here because, like, I'm not going to dump on you stuff that is just because I think are important or whatever. But more like, where are you coming from? You don't, like, maybe some of you read the book, maybe you didn't. But it doesn't matter. But there's a reason you came here. And I just wanted to hear from the room to get a sense, and then maybe I can also interact and see like how much of it we are engaging in the book, and how much of it can be other topics that we might explore here. Does that make sense? Is that a good? I don't like my voice in general, so it's already too much talking for my standards. So this is me. How about you? This is where I will stop for now. And now the idea is, those of you who have a more have less sense of social awkwardness will take the lead and model us, that we can have a conversation, and then that will break the ice for the rest of us. So the questions are: what is alive in you? What's going on? What brought you here? If you can ask questions, but you can also just, like, you can ask questions to me, but you can just ask questions on strategy in general to all of us. So yeah, why are you here? Why did you come to this session? Why does it matter for you? Is a kickoff. There's already a hand. I'm wondering if you want to pass the microphone, or there is a mobile microphone. Cool. That is really nice. So let's test that. We're using the room is small, but because somebody is recording something, so microphone might help with that kind of catching the sound.
Hi.
No.
I'm Iris. I came because of the title and because of the issue, which is large, as you said, and complex, and I think it's about humanity and about the planet. And I read this book called Ismail, which is from Daniel Quinn. It's made in the 90s, like 1990, and in the book there's a discussion between a gorilla and a man, and the gorilla kind of teaches the man about the history of humanity, how kind of when the population of Homo sapiens sapiens was still small enough, but then the populations kind of these smaller peoples started to grow too big, especially because of large amounts of the farming. So, and then some populations started to fight in a way which wasn't just like, you stay there, we stay here, and everything's fine, but in a way like, I'm gonna kill you unless you are gonna adapt to my way. And I kind of came here with those thoughts in mind, that there is this heritage from way back to 10,000 years ago, when this kind of stream or move started to happen, that we're kind of overpopulated on the planet, and the way to deal with it is not to kind of withdraw or kind of stay in smaller societies or smaller communities and populations, but some are want to win, as you mentioned that word, and keep on winning and keep on growing. And the title of the book is very okay, here's an answer. So I'm just what's the answer? How do we do that we get smaller, or what? And how do we do it together? Because is it 7 billion people, or how much on the planet? I'm not that good in English, and I haven't checked the statistics lately. So, that's my question.
I can eventually, but I'm not going to speak again. So let's just take some space to hear more.
Okay, hey, I'm Tero, and I'm struggling thinking should I go for small, really detailed, really specific campaigns, try to change something little, and maybe they will add up eventually, and something will happen. Or should I go, for revolution or something like that? But on that, I read this kind of powerful book from what was the name? This dude in Egypt, which got freed from prison. Allah, something like that. Allah, and he was like, okay, if you go for revolution, you're gonna better check out whose revolution it's gonna be. So I'm gonna kind of thinking, struggling with these two approaches. I guess that's why I'm here.
Hi, I'm Michael. Thank you for telling us where you're coming from. I feel why I'm here is because I've been in Extinction Rebellion for a couple of years now, and we have in this country, I think, we've built a movement that's very good at getting people on the streets. We do spectacular demos, we block some streets, we get some media coverage, and we've done that for a few years now, and people are really good at doing that. I have barely done anything at all for that. I just kind of try to show up. And what I've been thinking recently is that, okay, we're doing this. What's next? So I'm literally here for what you said also, where do we go from here? How do we convert this into the kind of change we actually want? And there's a lot of specific, I too could, I think, name a lot of specific things, like who are we trying to affect here? Are we trying to affect the government? Are we trying to affect the media? Are we trying to get to ordinary people? What are we trying to do? And I think I read your book, and the part that resonated with me definitely the most was exactly how do we win? What does winning look like? I hope you'll forgive me, but my academic background is in military history. So I am not here to militarize Extinction Rebellion, believe me. But it strikes a chord in me as a military historian when you say how do we win? What does winning look like? And because we know what losing looks like. But what does winning actually look like? And when we know what winning looks like, how do we get there? So I am here for the very specific reason of thinking about what does it look like when we win, and how do we do that? Thank you. Who's next?
Okay, thank you. My name is Jaakko. I've been politically active for 10 years in the Left Party, and I always wanted to do more and more, but then I'm really frustrated, and I don't know if I would like to go more into activism or for somehow I think doing politics is really difficult at this moment. So I think that actually I think that I'm worried with what was you said your name. I think would need like a clearer vision. So what is it we really want to present, like a utopia, and then make it so that it's not a utopia anymore. And also we need to be inclusive. So I don't believe in a revolution that it's true that there's very much division and hatred and the polarization. So we have to build a future that even Donald Trump and his people would be, oh, like we want this, and then they are the people that will say that, oh, we thought like this. We thought like this from the beginning that we can sell the new version of life to them. But I think this is what everybody feels. I'm not saying something really good ideas, like something that somebody else hadn't thought of, but I just want to hear the utopia or the vision that was the word that we can make, that we can sell to the politics in Brussels, that would say to everybody that we don't forgive your debts. Okay, thank you.
Hello, I'm Helena. Thank you very much. It was a good teaser for buying the book. I'm going to do it. I was wondering about, if I understood right, your one goal, and maybe it is in the book, is to find a theory which can hold the complexity, and then the other part is how to execute this kind of theory in the practice. And I think I'm maybe more interested in about the execution part, because I think it will involve complexity also. It's very hard to believe that there would be a simple, straightforward or any kind of not complex way of executing something which is basically so complex. And I think we have the kind of system theory and complexity theory and chaos theory and so on. So there is there are theories which are based on complexity, but the execution part is something which is the real challenge. And I'm very much looking forward for your book, but that is the question I mostly have.
Especially because I'm Jelena and Helena just spoke, so it's a nice follow-up. Yeah, and also it's follow-up in a way that I think there are actually answers. There are policy that have been for a very long time designed. I am a member of Democracy in European Movement, so Yanis Varoufakis, for example, and comrades. They designed the whole program, how to make the world livable and just and fair, including climate justice. Also Jason Hickel is also my other guru. So he also has this degrowth policy. We know in academia especially, there are answers how to change the world. But again, as Helena said, how to do that, it's really intriguing question, or maybe not even possible to answer. For example, DiEM25, they work as a transnational movement, so they work on many levels, but also they think that the way to affect policy is that you have to enter the parliamentary life. So they created electoral wings across Europe, but they are not very successful. And then how they can be successful, or how any radical leftist party can be successful when leftists cannot unite and they betrayed on so many occasions the electorate or the population. So in this growing climate of neo-fascism, I think it's very difficult to regain this trust with the population. So yes, also searching for some sort of answers or a way of how to organize. I mean, you can see that these are all variants of the same question so far.
Yeah, may I talk? Just
Please.
No, it's because there is like I heard 6 people, and there is a coherency, and I'd like to just kind of reflect back what I heard, and then kind of trying to make a synthesis, and then I will give you like it's not. Yeah. So starting with Iris, I can't see. So I think this part is really interesting of this figuring out how like formation of class society and how it is connected to colonial ways of thinking about like what are we trying to achieve here? Who's an enemy? Who classifies as enemy? Where are the division lines? Where are the where is the unity we are looking for? And I think that is the sort of the starting point of any strategy is who are my people, right? What am I? Who is the we that has a problem that is trying to solve this problem? I think that is. Yeah, so that is where I would start, and that would bring me to Jakob is where? Jakob is you. Yeah. So there's that part of like the vision, because the only way a vision works if it happens through collective process. Because if the collective process didn't happen before, then the outcome will still be collective process, so you didn't guess it right. You didn't anticipate correctly. So the only way to anticipate correctly what the outcome will be is if the entire thing involves majorities throughout, right? In getting, and by majorities I mean actual majorities, global majorities, and that implies a lot of listening, because we had this talk in somewhere where in one part of the book we're referring to 3 models of transformation: inside the system, outside the system, and ruptural. And this framework comes from elsewhere. It's not our invention. But there is a part where we heard it. We were like, well, the ruptural movement doesn't really exist very much. People would tell me, and we're like, at this moment, like I can count 5 revolutions taking place now in the world. It's just they're not happening in Europe. That doesn't mean they're not existing, right? So also to get a sense of like there are things that are large collective processes, really mind-opening processes going on in many parts of the world. That is just, well, I mean, they are doing it. We are not doing it. So maybe we should learn. And not because there's, I mean, I'm not romanticizing. I'm just saying if it works, I have to learn. And I'm not interested in where it's happening. I'm just interested in, okay, these people are doing better than me. So I think the best way to control the outcome of what we are winning is if from the beginning we are with the people. And this is what the winning, like what does winning look like? Typically looks like this. But in more practice, what is it that we can do? But like, is it small stuff? Is it like larger agitation and so on? There is a confusion in general in Europe because in middle class Europeans, into which I'm including myself, about what is the type of win we want. So there is a type of win which is more connected to sort of what you were saying, like there's a policy. Like we know, right, what's it called, the green works, European level institutions that will run the energy transition, things like that. Like these are all written in some documents. So that is one way of thinking of like winning incrementally, policy by policy. That is the wrong way. The correct way is you start an achievable campaign, like a timed campaign that by the end of it, your side is, your people are more powerful. So this is an hegemonic struggle. It's always the hegemonic struggle. If you get out of the process with your side more powerful than before, is it that, so that matters. Who is declaring victory? If you push, and the government or the parliament passes a law, the government or the parliament declares victory. Naturally, right? Which, as opposed to, when you do a strike and the boss backs off, the boss cannot declare, like there's no way of So the conflict is visible, and you push someone away, and you say, our side, and we are better organized at the end of the day. So I think the contradiction can be resolved if you ask that question not at the level of policy, like I'm going to win one policy or I'm going to win the entire constitution. So that's one way of asking it. Another way of asking it is, how am I going to get more power? Because then you can get it incrementally while still looking at better opportunities, like stuff like that happened are happening in Burkina Faso or in Nepal. So you can also think that, but you can do it now, whatever is possible at this point. So looking at the power relations solves that conflict. And then how do we do that is, so the execution part, right? So how do we do that? We pick stuff from ecology, actually. And ecology, not ecology like environmentalism or not that kind of, like the actual science of ecology, doing gardening even, or doing large-scale agroforestry or something, which is to, as part of the process, include diversity into it, embed diversity into the process, but it's intentional diversity. So if anybody ever, like if you ever engaged in ecological conversations, you don't want all kinds of diversity. In many cases, you're like taking stuff away. Like this, I don't want these species. They're not good for my intentions because it's intentional, right? I'm trying to reach somewhere. So that means certain things are not good for that. And sometimes you say, I want this and this, but they have to be far away from each other. They should not, there's no collaboration, but I need them both just the same. So it's a diversity that is managed and it's harvested. It's something that you're planting there, right? You're very intentional about what kind of diversity you want and in which configuration you want it so that you can get somewhere. So this kind of system change, where we want to go and so on. Embed the diversity into the organizational model so that people can simultaneously go towards the same goal and hate each other. You know? So it's really, because you really, in many times, you really need that. Like, common goal, we're going there. I don't want to talk to you just the same, but let's just go there. You know, like and this is not a personal level, it's organizational level, you can still do that. So this is like, as you might have noticed, I didn't answer any question, but like, just circling around some of the things that I heard. But these are some of the things that are kind of touching the book, so this is why I wanted to kind of wrap up at this point. Just take it not as a response, but as a reaction. And I'll just pass back now because there are more people, and maybe this triggers more conversation now. So I'll give the word for you, and then you can roll again.
Yeah, so then, all right, I'm Lauri, and this is not a question, but this is maybe, it's a ponder about the time frame for winning, basically. Because, and this of course comes from the book, which we read, and a lot of us really liked it. And the thing we were mostly discussing after reading it was about the time frame. In the book it's given 5 years. 5-year time frame for basically winning, and this is also the time frame in which we should be planning and executing our grand strategies. And the 5 years comes, of course, from the climate deadline. And I feel that because I too have the background in the Extinction Rebellion here in Finland, and I feel kind of implicitly we have had that 5-year, something like 5-year time frame all the time. So now it's 5-year time frame again. And then I guess my intuition at the moment takes me to the direction that building some kind of counter-hegemony, doing the ideological work, which is to be done with the masses, building trust with global majorities, it's a big ask to be done in 5 years. And at the moment the left is not winning globally. There are some exceptions, of course, maybe in Mexico, maybe in Colombia, and so on. But the big picture is maybe not that winning one. So I just want to let you know that we had these thoughts after reading the book, and we were wondering that when you were putting that book together, did you have any other perspectives into this question other than the climate deadline? But you are not obliged to respond. But just wanna let you know.
Hi, I'm Sidir, and I wanted to engage with what you were talking about in terms of doing actions or planning, making tactical plans that build power in terms of how you succeed. And I just want to open up a little bit what we mean when we think about building power, because I think one element that maybe you included or intended but didn't explicitly say is also about building capacity. Because I think many people, when they think of building power, they think of getting more membership, getting more people out onto the street, these kinds of things. But there's also organizational capacity. There are structures that capture that capacity, and actions can build those, test those, and refine those. And I think that also connects with the point you were making about diversity and how you contain it in its complexity and contradiction. So I just wanted to offer that as something people can expand on.
Hi, I'm Iitu. Thanks for, of course, the book and for being with us here today. I just finished reading the book like a few days ago, and I have been terrified since because it's so brutally honest about like the things we need to be doing, and it says the things like it's wording the things that we maybe all have been thinking about, but not just admitting to ourselves. And the one line that like stuck with me from the book is that we're failing, and we're failing to admit that we're failing. And that's not a small thing, and it hits me like very emotional level. That's because of course we're all working hard with different movements and topics, but the fact is that we're not like nearly winning, and it's very frustrating to even. I mean, of course, these. I have a million thoughts in my head. I feel like we're having a hard time, especially in Finland maybe, to even speak with these terms in like with winning and with I'm not ambitious enough, and we need more of that mentality that this is like life or death question and situation, and we need to take ourselves like very, very seriously, and I think we're really struggling with that, and yeah, it makes me horrified, but I'm glad I stumbled upon this book and this event today, but yeah, not really a question, not really anything, but just thoughts.
Yeah, thanks. I want to react to that. Because it is really I mean, there is a tone in the book that is kind of contagious. It's not like we are terrifying other people. We're just saying we are terrified, and then that is the contagion that is taking place. So that is to say, like, the thing of time frames, winning, like, we went to places, and some information comes from climate science, like if you do, like there are red lines, right? And then we were saying, okay, what is the plan that is compatible with that? But I'm not really interested in like, is it 5 years or 6 years? I'm more interested in like, what is the winning plan actually? What is the end game here? And I think that is the more interesting question. And that question only appears if we take urgency seriously. Like, actually, I have to win. This cannot wait. So just to react, like, and feed back into that conversation of like, so in 2011, I'm in Portugal. There's anti-austerity protest. There's a very common slogan in the union, in the workers' movement, in the unions, which is a luta continua, which means the struggle goes on. And I'm like, that is the worst slogan, like, for this time. I mean, I understand how useful it was in the 70s against the dictatorship, but it's really, it doesn't. Like, that's not, it's certain, we really have to win. We can't, like, it's not our grandchildren and so on. So there's a part of that that is really, that I think that time, like, not time frame, but that delivery deadlines help deliver. If any one of you ever delivered a project. So there's that part. And then, once you say that, then you are horrified. But then, so what I want to share about what you said is, you can only ask questions you can answer. This is like very standard tautological statement, but so the good example to this is, I'm talking to activists from, women activists from Sudan. Their goal is to survive, like another week. This is the feminist struggle. It's not that they don't share, like, they share the same visions, like they're talking in the same terms, but they're like, I can win this. Like, if we build grassroots power, if you have self-organization, self-defense mechanisms, self-care, like care mechanisms, collective care mechanisms, we can do that because they live in a state of civil war. Then I go to Turkey and I talk to feminists and they're like, I should be able to go out at night and go back home at night. I can win this. Like, this is the problem that they pose for themselves, because their context allows for that kind of question, right? And then I go to Spain, and Spanish activists are saying, I want to be able to define what a relationship is for me. Like, I don't want to receive definitions of relationship and then try to fit myself. I just want to define it. And I mean, but if you go back, like, if these people are talking, if you put these people together, they agree on where they want to go. Like, it's not like they are having different cultural whatever. They just live in different contexts where certain questions are answerable, and they address those questions because they can see the end of it. They can say, this with this, I can do that. So with the book, what we are trying to do is to create. This is how I also started in the beginning. Like, we need a framework in which we can ask these tough questions to ourselves and remain curious about them, because generally, avoiding a question happens when it doesn't fit into your mental frameworks. If you don't have mental frameworks, and we don't, right? This is the whole point. Like, we don't have mental frameworks to easily answer, what about China? That's not, I don't know, But I know that I have to answer it just the same. So it's a bit of a confusing situation. So this is why we need this framework, like theory of change, organizational model, in which we can be curious about these questions and push ourselves further, right? And I'm pushing myself further also, because, I mean, the whole thing came up because I realized, wait, it's not easy to sleep if I have, So I need a way of having some light. Like, I need something. This is why I started asking, like, I say myself, but like everyone involved in the book project has done similar things. Like, start asking, right, so what's the plan? What's the end game? What's going on? Like, what does victory look like to you, and so on. So we started asking these questions, and we're like, okay, so now there is something in the air that we can catch, and this is like the catching happens in the book or previously in the talk, which is like, okay, with this framework, we can remain in the room and talk, continue talking. The book does not give you, it gives us the it recognizes the task, but the whole idea of holding complexity means that there is no recipes in it directly, right? There's also that part of the book, which is like, it really holds the complexity, which means it doesn't tell you what to do. It tells you what are the list of questions that we can ask in each context. And we have our own answers for Portugal. We also have some answers for Europe because we are embedded in that, but like, I have no idea how to engage with the farmers' struggles in India. But it's still my struggle. So how can I say these two things at the same time? Like, it is me, but I'm not there. I have no idea, but it's still my people. So that is the kind of holding class, holding majorities, holding us together kind of stuff. So this is my reaction. It's not really very coherent. Are there more people? Yeah, there is. Cool. Can we pass over there? Can you raise your hand? Just so people know where to go. Yeah, sorry. And then there will be another one in the back. Cool.
Yes, so I haven't read the whole book yet, but I was today reading it quite a lot, and it was so interesting. And one question came to mind, because the book started by kind of going through different kind of revolutionary models, and then some of them were speaking about like growing the power of capital. Some of them were speaking about growing the political power, and then in the end you had this suggestion for the movement ecology, and yeah, the question that I have for you is like, what I have maybe two questions and one thought. But one question is like, the first question is that, because I didn't read the whole book, so I need to ask now, but do you have any kind of power analysis to suggest to us, like what kind of, about the target, about like who is the villain, who is the target group of organizing that has enough power against this villain target that we have? Like, do you have, what kind of power analysis do you have, and what kind of like, and what kind of target groups have you organized? Have you organized workers? What sector workers? Have you organized farmers? What kind of like target groups have you been organized, and what kind of wins have you gone through or known in your locals, like gone through? And then a third thing, like a thought, because like workers organizing is about organizing for material rights, isn't it? Like, or isn't it something? Have I understood wrong?
I mean, you can say that about climate, so I don't know.
Yeah,
What are material
also.
rights? Everything is material.
Yeah, but I'm thinking kind of, because in Finland, like Finnish pension money comes from colonial money. So it's kind of, when you organize for climate, and against colonialism because it's part of capitalism, then because the Finnish workers are getting so much money because of colonialism and capitalism, pensions and higher salary and this kind of thing. So how to kind of build, do you know have you been involved in this like international workers organizing where there have been like successful kind of solidarity between people that kind of benefit from colonialism and don't benefit from colonialism, and what has it looked like? But it's our struggle. I don't want to kind of third party this struggle to you, but like if you have any experience.
Yeah, I mean, 2 days ago, Spanish people had a general strike for Palestine. So, I mean, and then 2 weeks ago, the Italian workers did a strike on Palestine. They're not winning. I mean, they're winning with Israel. Like, Israel is Italy, like Europe, Israel is the same project, right? But the workers are doing something else. So sometimes it's not very hard. It's not very far. You just have to look a bit more carefully. So I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to answer. I just wanted to say this because like just 2 days ago, my Spanish comrades were not going to work. But there was someone behind you. Can we pass the mic? I'm sorry, I will talk about the other things, but I want to hear more.
Yeah, hello, my name is Amos, and I'm also involved in Extinction Rebellion, legal and funding stuff also, so I think it was great to hear about like the organizational part, also reading some parts of your book. And what's on my mind now is the inflexibility of the status quo was what you described, and I think for the wave of climate protest and movements I've been involved with since like 2019, I think there's been kind of a hard like brick wall that the movements kind of hit during COVID at least, and like German comrades thought that okay, now we kind of lost the momentum and we go in for a defensive fight, kind of bring the metaphor was building strong points within unions and the parties, because the like grassroots mobilizations kind of lost momentum, and movements that did try to escalate the situation were quite hardly repressed, criminalized even, so kind of there was a feeling of powerlessness in like direct action, and thus kind of a idea of some kind of defensive struggle going to the green and left and other kind of building communities, and this kind of work was one reaction that I've also seen, and kind of myself kind of taking part in anti-repression work and trying to build alliances with actors with resources. So I would be curious about if such a split kind of, or I think just to give a context for that, right, the phenomenon I think happened in Finland with the like house occupation movement, that many of the people then joined political parties and try to do a career there. And that was kind of what happened with those people. And similarly, the climate movement could experience a similar event of people, the movement disintegrates and people go wherever, do some sort of a career with some maybe politically important work. But what is then the profile? What is the movement, the we? Does it disintegrate also simultaneously? So that would maybe be my, what's the platform? You discuss the political parties in the book, so I'd be curious to hear some reaction to the idea of the climate movement potentially disintegrating and still who's holding the agenda after such a disintegration possibly.
Just do an awkward silence.
Okay, we're wondering about the root cause, and I have my opinion, which is the billionaires. Surprise. All around it seems to be that now the masks are off. And that is something that unites also the right. These days the normal people from the right, so I don't think the division is, or the dichotomy is left and right. That doesn't work out, at least within the time frame we have to use. So you had some examples on movements perhaps where people who hate each other have worked together towards the goals. Can you state some of the
All
examples?
of them.
Sorry?
All of them. There are images from Gezi in Istanbul in 2013, someone holding the Kurdish flag and some nationalist holding the Turkish flag. They're both running from the tear gas. Like there are actual images of these people kind of putting lemon to each other's eye. All, like everywhere where you have majorities, you have very conflicting and contradictory stories of what's actually going on there, always. So, of course, these are like mass mobilizations. It's not an organization, right? But sometimes if you keep hold, so I think the good example, and I think that is kind of can answer also what you were saying. You didn't tell me your name, so I'm just gonna look at you. In Uruguay, well, I have to remember this. I think in the 70s, but maybe in early 80s, they create something called the Frente Amplio, which is a wide front of left groups, all of them, and this comes from the bottom up in the sense of it comes directly from the streets because there is a time where they built the confederation of unions, trade unions, and therefore everyone is on the street, all the small factions of groups and everyone like with all the beef that they have and teas, like all that mess of the 70s, you know, how people were very, very convinced about their own version of what was going on. All of those people, they create this platform. That platform passed through to this front. It passed through dictatorship. Then it went into parliament and it held the president. So what's he called, Mujica? The famous, he always appears, there was a president of Uruguay that was so famous, guy that always keeps commenting on a bunch of things that Jose Mujica? Anyway. Huh? No. So anyway, that is a wonderful example because it's really decades long, but in general, everywhere you are, you can do that. To think about, I mean, billionaires, a lot of people are talking about billionaires I've seen. There's one thing that I want to say about left and right. So, which is, my mother told me when I was 5, I was like, what is this thing? And she said, so the left is with the workers and the right is with the bosses. I did not change this definition since I'm 5. After reading, Grundrisse and whatever, like there's no need, like Capital. You read 3 volumes of Capital, you don't like that definition is still working for me. Like I mean, and in that way, I think we need the separation, right? But that's a value-based definition. It's not really like communication-wise. What am I saying in public or whatever? But there's a part of that really holds like who are my people, and I think that. What is the conflict here? What is the structural conflict here? And on one side, on which side am I? So I was telling you about this Frente Amplio because I also wanted to make publicity of a different part of the book, of this project, which is, so we give the framework, and then the book ends. It never tells like what are we going to do with that, right? So there's a 6th chapter of the book, which is the website of the book, where we have a bunch of articles of application of these ideas. So Frente Amplio, there are 2 people that, 2 comrades of ours that have studied this. They interviewed people, historical leadership, recent leadership, and so on. They wrote down and they made a series of videos, so that's there. But we also have people that wrote about institutional capability of the climate movement in Europe. There is an article that I wrote with another comrade because we did 8 years of climate jobs campaign, so just working with unions for 8 years in Europe and outside. So there's a feedback of that. There's a feedback coming from the student movement, like the people from Fridays for Future and then End Fossil. What was the goal? Like what was the strategic focus of that, and how far did it go? I think there are like 18 articles there. So that is a space that we are still feeding, right? So this one that I said about Uruguay, that just came out last week. And I think now there should be one about coordination spaces in Europe and experiences of like what happened and so on. So there's part of the application of these things and like concrete examples of what can be done and who is doing what, and what are we all supposed to learn from that is part of the book project, but it's not part of the book, the product. So it's over there, and it's not like we just invite people, and people are just like, you know, we listen to something, and they're like, you're not allowed to keep that for yourself. So what do we do about that? And then there's something that is produced. So there's also part of that work that is not really, I don't really have a good quick answer, like, what is a target that we organize? There are a bunch of things that I did, but there are like really detailed report backs on the website that you can see as continued reading in that way. Some of them are historical, some of them are very recent, some of them are more like what some people call scenario planning, so looking at the future, like here are some opportunities and stuff like that. And also some of them are about power analysis, actually. So I'm just gonna not say much. I mean, there's a part of it in the book where we so the book makes an argument, and then when it comes to the end, it runs the argument again, but this time in terms of implementation. So that means we revisit everything that we said, almost, but in a slightly more concrete way, like what does that actually mean in real life? So maybe when you get there, you get a bit better sense of, how does that actually look like in real life? How are we with time? I'm not paying attention. No, I know what time it is, but I don't know what that means. Like, it's just a number, right? In terms of like how much time are we? I didn't really pay attention to these. I think you told me, but I didn't. Okay, so we still have time if there are more. So there are, cool. So then let's make another round. Maybe first Aurora because she didn't speak, and then pass it back to you.
Yes, so I have a comment from someone following online. It's a comrade, Rina. She's asking or commenting, I'm not sure. You talked in the beginning about the enormous mobilizations in Portugal and Turkey. Which kinds of movements did these originally rise from? I was thinking about what I've learned about left-wing populist movements and how it's been suggested that in Southern Europe these movements have been successful because of these areas having been hit by austerity measures the hardest. The government in Finland have now pushed incredibly harsh austerity measures as well, and the northern welfare state model is collapsing. Finland now has the second highest unemployment rate in Europe. Do you find these well-known mobilizations having risen from workers' movements more than environmental movements? And if yes, how do you view the need of the climate movement to collaborate between the workers' movements? Do you think we should tie our actions to economic concerns more than we have? And then she said that it's very nice that we're all talking here.
Just so you know that I have like spotlights coming to my eyes. So if you're raising your hand, you really have to raise it so I can see it. It's not easy to see you. It's a bit of a strange.
Yeah, this is just a small comment or maybe a question too, from a different kind of angle perhaps. You said that you know who your people are based on your very wise mother. And I was thinking that maybe this is the execution part or strategy part, that how do you get the people who are your people to understand that they are your people? And of course I'm referring to like the elections in the United States and so on, the political behavior of people. Just, yeah, like this.
Hey, I am Öner from Turkey, and we told just a bit before the event with Sinan, I came here with very many questions, but when I listened the others' questions, I think I find some answers. I'm not sure, but I want to say, if there is an organization which organizes the other organizations for a global reaction, we should part in, I think. If it's not exist, then we should create it. Is it right? What's the situation? What do you think about this? Do we have an organization which organizes others already, or? Okay, thanks.
I can occupy the space while people think. No, I wanted to just check something. Did you finish what you wanted to say, or did I interrupt you? No, him. Sorry. I think I interrupted you, didn't I? I'm sorry about that, because I kind of got excited and it's a bit high. I slept like 4 hours because I was traveling. So, but please, like, if you want to pick it up and elaborate a bit better, after I speak, you can still think about it. Sorry. So just, yeah, sorry, that was kind of in my head. So those protests, what did they rise from, right? That's the online question. I mean, it's a bit of a strange. So one thing is, what is the trigger? In Tunisia, there was a street seller that just burned himself, which is a recurring activity in Tunisia, because I mean, this is like every week this was happening. But at that time, in that particular one, everyone came to the street and there was a revolution. So I don't know. In Turkey, it was a park. In Brazil, it was the increase in public transport fare. Yeah, in Europe, in Europe, in Ireland, in Southern Europe, and so on, it was a bit more like structural, structural recurring austerity policies and so on. But I think where does it rise? What does it rise from is also a question about agency, right? And that's the follow-up that is in that question about like, okay, but who is doing that? Like, why is that happening? Who's leading that, and so on? And I think it's very, very diverse, and I've never seen a good science of predicting that kind of stuff. What I do know is that there's a book called If We Burn by Vincent Pevins. Yeah. Which he's a journalist, and he has been in Brazil when these things were happening, but then he traveled around and he interviewed different people, and there's like he grasps some of the commonalities in those stories in terms of like what was actually happening on the ground and what was not happening on the ground but was reported by journalists anyway. So also to get a sense, I think that's an interesting book to get like deep into into what is there. But the follow-up to that is like, is it the workers, is it the environmentalists, or whatever, ecology, climate? I think that question is not well posed. So there is a deep discussion. This because I'm not old enough for that, but in the 90s there was a serious discussion with Negri and Hardy, so Antonio Negri and so on, autonomous and so on. So the question of whether there is the movement or if there are movements. So the argument that came from the other side is that there's one movement that has different angles to it. This is really Gramscian conversation. You don't need to know anything about this, but like I do think there is I understand that there are different movements because we can identify them and you can draw borders, like boundaries around them and understand who is in, who is out to some extent and so on. But sometimes also hold that judgment and think there's one movement actually, just has different angles of operation. Like sometimes you're looking at sometimes you're looking at genocide. Sometimes you're looking at new oil and gas projects. Sometimes you're looking at some privatization. But you're looking at, because it's the same system, right? You can also think of it in these terms. And when you think of it in these terms, it's a bit more, you get more flexibility about like, what does it mean for movements or whatever. Like all these terms become a lot more clearer in your head, right? Because all of these things are attacks to the same people somehow. So I think that is my reaction. I think, so how do you get your people into a people is a really interesting question. And there is, so I learned a lot about it from Amilcar Cabral, which is a revolutionary in the 60s and 70s in Guinea-Bissau. So that was a Portuguese colony. And they declared independence before there was a revolution in Portugal that toppled the dictatorship and so on. So they there was self-management and they liberated territories and So it's really interesting story. And these were called, like these are called the Red Africa. So this was connected to Mozambique, Angola. So these people were really coming from a different branch of African national liberation movements. And one of the things that they were doing is that they were building the nation out of scratch. Like they realized that the nation that they were organizing didn't exist. It existed in contrast to the colonial power, but it didn't have cohesion of itself. So they built that, right? They built that based on whatever is the enemy. In that case, it's the Portuguese colonialism, because basically that kind of made the definition of the other side. And I think that always helps in terms of identifying the other side, helps you identify your people as well. Like identifying who is causing the problem sometimes helps. So the billionaire stuff also helps in that way. Like, okay, so these people are fucking whom, right? And then they're like, oh, okay, so you as well, nice, come in. So, and then there's another very like long anecdotal shot that I want to do for the theory geeks, because I know you are here. There is a book called The Manifesto of the Communist Party that is published at a time that there is no Communist Party. There's no party. There's no such thing. And for another 20 years, there's no party. But they are writing the manifesto of it anyway. So it is interesting because it is an intervention to a concrete social situation where by writing the book, they create the working class. I mean, it's not like, don't think of it as a like unique Hollywood-esque kind of situation, but the intervention that they're doing is, at that moment in 1848, there is no working class. Like you can objectively define it, but subjectively, like in real life, people are not thinking of themselves in these terms. And somebody says, look, this is one way of looking at this reality. And that is one, and then eventually now we talk, like everybody's talking about like some working movement, working class, whatever. Like those things became common for at least 100 years and probably more after that. So sometimes the framings help. So one of the things that we do in the book about like defining this global decision-making power, and then like, okay, who is making the decisions at this point, right? Where are these decisions made? Is it in state offices? Is it in headquarters of banks? Is it, looking at these places? And then by looking at that, they're like, okay, and this as opposed to whom? right? And then you get to see, oh, this is really interesting, because I thought I was fighting against the mass, like they just fired 250 people in Portugal in a call center. I thought I was doing that. Turns out the bank, like the people that are insuring that are the same people that are insuring a mine in Turkey, and there are 2,000 people today on the street against that mine and fighting because it's a mine, it's a rural area, so they're fighting the army, not the police. So you know, like defining the other side also helps you create some cohesion on your side. So I think that is also an interesting way of thinking. Like one of the things that we're doing is really, we say there is a global working class, and by working class we use the ecofeminist literature. So not just wage labor, but all kinds of labor that in one way or another are exploited by the same people or by the same interests. Yeah, so this is a bit of a long, divergent way of answering, because I'm like simultaneously not making spoilers about the book, but also kind of it's a bit different. So I made a list, I think 3 years ago, because I really like gossip, left gossip. You know. So I made a list of internationals. I found 65. So you know how Trotsky's, so anyway, I don't want to do this now, but like there are a lot of coordination spaces. Some of them are like for progressive internationals, so they are like actually substantial and like and properly global, like holding serious mass organizations besides some like outside of Europe, there are like really proper organizations that are part of that dynamic. There are a bunch of other coordination spaces that are not party-like, political party-like. They are more like movement-like. And I think XR did a good job about that to some extent, like doing something at least internationally and creating some framework in which people could operate. There were quite some experiences, and there's a recent article on the website just now. Mariana wrote it because she has been facilitating some of these spaces about like specific coordination attempts that we did within the climate justice movement and how far did it go, right? So this is my answer. Like, there are loads of attempts of coordination. Some of them are party, like whatever, 700th international, but others are like stuff like World Social Forum. There are still people, like there will be World Social Forum next year in Benin. That's a thing, you know, that thing still exists, and and it's massive. It's just in Europe, it's kind of out of fashion because we live with fashion. But like when you live with struggle and not with fashion, certain things remain a bit longer with you, as long as they're useful. So I don't know. There are loads of it. It's very hard to map. It's I think currently one of the good examples is the global women's strike, which is very stable organization, very grassroots, global South leadership, and so on. So that's another example. Yeah, so this is just my reaction to what I heard. How are we doing? Are we tired? Are we happy? Are we energized? I want to give some space. I mean, there are I see two hands of people that already said something. So I'm just gonna. I'm trying to get an engagement check. You can get the microphone. I'm not gonna silence you. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Oh, cool, 9 new people. So no, I was just trying to get like if you're kind of creating a bubble of 10 people talking to each other, or is this working? Can I get some nods or whatever? I don't know how the Finnish culture works. Like, do you react? Cool. Okay, so this is fine. So let's just get another round. So there's one, and then another two, and then we pass on here, and then we see how it goes.
Yeah, no. If somebody who hasn't spoken wants the mic, you can have it. I have a bad joke, and I have something serious to say. The bad joke is if you ask like, what is the trigger event that makes a revolution happen? As a historian, let me assure all of you, we will tell you exactly, and it will be obvious. The problem is we're going to do that 20 years from now, and we don't have time for that. So it's always going to look obvious in retrospect. The problem is we're living in it now, so we have no idea. But seriously, what you mentioned, like Amilcar Cabral, this idea of creating a movement, creating a people through opposition. We literally did that. That's how we built this country. We created Finnishness in direct opposition to Russian rule. We did it through civil disobedience. We did it through mass action. We did it through ideological mobilization. We have done these things literally in this country. This is how we founded this country. We just don't like telling that story. We tell a different story. And this is, I think, you mentioned Gramsci, and this is, I think, one of the things that I have been thinking about, which I just want to put out there, is that we have the massive job of somehow trying to shatter these cultural hegemonies that we find ourselves under. Like, for instance, like to dip into political analysis for just a second, the Finnish political parties in parliament right now are deciding on a debt brake, like the stupid one they have in Germany, where even the Germans have looked at their debt brake and they go that this is a really bad idea. Well, the Finnish parties are deciding on one right now because the hegemony of neoliberalism is such that even most of the left-wing parties in Finland agree that we need continuing austerity to control our debt. So, like, we have an immense job in breaking down these sort of entrenched ways of thinking, like that a national debt is more important than the climate, than like the literal lives of people. So that there is a gigantic amount of work that we need to do in terms of shattering these. And here, like, there is a gigantic amount of power being held by a quite small number of media organizations who are able to dictate that. And I just want to put it out there that this is what has been keeping me up. Is how do we do this? How do we, this is like I'm trying to take a step forward on how do we get the people who are our people to understand that they are our people. One of the objectives to that is sort of the grand narratives that we find ourselves stuck with. And that, to me, is like a gigantic problem of communication and a gigantic problem of power. And that's basically what I wanted to say. Somebody else wanted the mic.
Thank you all. I'm Emma, and I'm part of environmental movement in Finland. And well, I try to keep this simple and express it in plain language. So simply put, when I use my imagination, I indeed can see us here in Finland, like. I can see us at some point when things go south, overthrowing a government. If not this one, maybe a bad government in the future. But we are a nation of 5.7 million people, plus people with different statuses on top of that. So what I worry is that we can have this mass movement. But do we have enough people to reshape and rebuild the system after that? Because it tends to happen so that the revolution eats its own children, and we are people. We only have 5.7 million people in here, with a millennial and Generation Zeta burnout cooking. So that's where we need some international cooperation, and in a way that it's another system that is pushed to the society from the outside, which just need help. Yeah, I think you got my idea. Yeah, so different waves of revolution, and having the people power and actually people executing it. Yeah.
Hi. I can continue from there. My name is Touko, and also from Helsinki, Finland. I was curious, like seriously, and curious to ask about your views in terms of kind of like narratives, energy, and theories of change within the climate movement. I feel that there's quite a change happening in terms of all those three currently. Sort of like old narratives are kind of like expiring and collapsing a little bit. Kind of like there was this trust perhaps in the UN-led negotiation process. There was some, although less trust trust in the kind of like in the commitments by fossil giants saying that like by this and this year they will become carbon neutral. Kind of like many of these kind of like old kind of like somehow emblems of trust are kind of like coming down just now. We crossed 1.5 degrees effectively, and that didn't cause any kind of like major upheaval. I feel that the kind of like the climate movement at the surface level is perhaps kind of like gathering kind of like new narratives, new kind of like sort of like sources of energy, and also new theories of change. And I'd be curious to hear like also like everyone's thoughts, but also your thoughts as to kind of like where to find them. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you for your book, and I'm definitely gonna buy it. Forgive me, but I'm gonna mention another book that probably many of you know or have read. This, what's it? Moral Ambition by Rutger Bregman. So I don't know, have you heard about this? There is this, he presents kind of a form, an idea that 5 to 7 people can come together and have some specific improvement point to something, which typically includes fundraising or some kind of like a mikä se on niin kuin technical improvement to something. The problem, however, I think it has not, at least in Finland, have very much wings, because many people, including myself, are not engineers. I don't have some kind of specific answer to some technical problem that could decrease emissions and so on and so on. But what I do have is that in my previous turn, I brought up the idea of utopia. Where do we want to, what is the end result that we could see the sustainable world where we could live? So I could go on and talk about this idea for the whole week, but I get to talk about it like 1 hour a month. So I just raising the thought here that if there's somebody that I feel like-minded, so even if I'm not an engineer, if somebody wants to join me in this kind of discussion group to change ideas, it can be about anything, and maybe this could be for even the rest of us, if you feel some like-minded ideas, this is a very good situation to connect, because I don't have any friends that are really so that they don't want to engage in this kind of thinking, and even in the political movement, I feel a bit stuck at the moment. So it's really difficult to fight against this mentioned austerity idea that now has been encompassed even by the Social Democrats and Green Party, and I just want to say one more thing, that personally, this idea that we have so and so little time to do so and so much, so it gives me enormous amount of stress. And last I heard a couple of weeks ago that someone said, oh, the next parliamentary election is the crucial one, that we have to win this. I was like, I've been now in 10 years of elections, that I refuse to think that it's like that this one tomorrow will be the day that we will win or we will fail. So I just want to think of where we can be in 100 years. Of course, there are different scenarios, but I think that this is some thought that gives me at least a bit space to breathe today and in 1 year and so on. So, thank you.
Hi, yeah. I want to go back to the question of finding your people or building your people, or however you want to describe it, because I want to engage with it in 2 ways. The first one is thinking about, you talked about the Communist Manifesto and these things of kind of creating it from that angle, but I want to also think about it from a very concrete angle, which is really like concretely doing things for the needs of the people that you've identified. Analyzing, identifying, recognizing, and acting on those needs. And we have lots of examples of that. You know, the Black Panthers did it, Lebanese resistance, the Yemeni resistance, Vietnamese resistance. A lot of resistance movements have done that, and that's how you become rooted in the people and you get leaders who are from the people. And I feel like it's an analysis that I haven't encountered in our discussions. I don't mean here, but in Finland. And the other angle that I want to take on that is also then what we mean by your people, because you were talking about this as well in terms of, you were talking about farmers in India as an example. But thinking specifically now, for example, about the situation in West Asia and the positions that I've heard from people in Finland with regards to the resistance movements there, which are often based on, so the positions I've heard from people here are often hesitant to endorse or embrace those movements. And that hesitation is often based on the fact that they're socially conservative movements, which ignores the concrete reality, or the reality that they are concretely opposing the imperial system that is also responsible for climate collapse and responsible for the social and economic collapse here. So I think there's a mistake in the level of analysis that's happening in terms of how we identify who our people are, which is not to say we should ignore social elements and like conservative positions, but I think we maybe should ground that first in who is actually doing resistance and how is that resistance happening and what is needed in different contexts, and then what our position in relation to that is. So yeah, just those two levels or angles.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, my name is Elena, and I have not read the book, so if an answer comes up from there, I will. Oh, it's okay. Hi. And I have not read the book, so if an answer comes up from that book, I will learn that later. But yeah, I was thinking on building like allianceships, and also about your metaphor or having the garden, that having the species that do not interact well kind of in the garden but far away from each other. And I think it's, I like the metaphor, but it's really hard to have it in real life when even your own species is like already fighting and tearing apart, as leftist movements do, just like splitting and fighting and tactics and all that stuff. So how to actually convince the people to be together in that garden, and how to fight our own, both the constant splitting up, but also like the perfectionism that we have, like in terms of allianceship, the other needs to be perfect in these terms. Because in Finland, the society, it's a very conservative society. There's a lot of people who are not on board on anti-colonial stuff, and there's a lot of like processes and discussions that have not been had. So kind of how to form allianceships with the people who you are not agreeing with, which are necessary, and how to keep yourself and your people from splitting up. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. I'll try to react. I think that we can, yeah, you can just keep it. I'm not seeing any other hands for now. So, yeah, one of the things that I'm not doing is one of the things that I'm doing is acknowledging that strategy is always context-based. And therefore, I'm not talking about specific strategy, like what you're saying. Like, I'm making some sort of meta conversation of like, our people as in class alignment, like an ideological agreement that we have, which therefore includes Trump voters by definition, but that doesn't tell me what to do about it, right? Which is a context-based discussion, which is the same with Palestine, which is the same, you know. So that context-based strategy has to happen, and I'm not talking about it because, you know, I'm not, what am I going to tell you? You know everything. I mean, for your contexts, much better than me, so that is the part that I'm not doing. Also in terms of uniting, like, I don't know. It depends on what... It's a completely different conversation if you're doing it with Brazilians in terms of like what unity looks like, because I'm doing it because, you know, we speak the same language and we have some comrades, and it's just completely different conversation in terms of how to hold diversity there and how to hold contradiction there. So just one side remark about narratives. Yeah, just to recognize, yeah, that's true. And it's also a little bit like generally being careful about okay, we are also reproducing mainstream narratives on a regular basis. So this thing of like colonial, like I have colonial thoughts, and I don't even know some of them. Some of them I do know, and I'm still repeating just because I'm stupid. But others I don't even know yet. And this happens in all levels. It's simply because of the amount of trash that is dumped on us on a daily basis, and how we are intrinsically connected to, like, our material interests currently depend on the fact that the market works and so on. So capitalism reproduces itself through us, right? So also acknowledging that and understanding, like, many times you are making assumptions about stuff just because we swallowed. Like, if you talk to people from Burkina Faso, nobody talks about military coup. Everyone is talking about our revolution. And this is like MST, La Via Campesina. Like the basic people, La Via Campesina in Burkina Faso is talking about their revolution that they are doing. And then they tell you, here's what I'm doing. And similar situation is now happening in Venezuela, right? There's a peace prize that was given. So just to get a sense of like, why do I think these things that I think? And so in general, listen to grassroots, and even then be critical about, because some of the grassroots are more accessible to us than others, because some of them, the editorial board of The Guardian picks them, and others, they are not picking. So this is, in all levels, we're like, am I reproducing something that I swallowed? And so, and it's really hard work, like particularly if you don't speak the language, like local language, it's really, really hard to get to the delicacies of it. So it's just a side remark, just agreeing with what you said. I just want to make two comments about, so one thing about what you said about, like, I can imagine something happening here, which is what some people in Sri Lanka think is like they already have an eco-socialist president or prime minister. There is, however, a slight difference between international and global. And I just want to bring that in. There is a subtlety there, which is whether we imagine things happening at national levels, and then we build some international solidarity around it, or if we already have to start thinking transnational level and actually do the strategy at that level. And in the book we are proposing the second one, that at the national level you don't, like, the synchronization doesn't work, and which is what happened with Syriza, right? Because 2 years after Syriza gave up, let's say, Podemos came. And 1 year later, the Portuguese came, but that was already way too late. And it's just like, but they were expecting that domino effect. And if you didn't coordinate in advance, then you cannot coordinate at the time. So coordination is like, strategy is really coordination imposed top-down. Not top-down as in somebody has more power, but the level of abstraction is higher. So on that level, and then it conditions what you do in the local and how you want to adjust to that. So that, I think, is an interesting subtlety that is I think it's important to think about that. This is not an answer to what you said. It's just something that came to my mind. And finally, about what you said, and this is where I want to close, because this is really the core moment about, like, what's going on with the climate movement, where are we heading now, which is sort of circling back to some of the what next kind of stuff that came in the beginning. I have my opinions, but I would actually want to say here is that almost by definition of the term, people learn in movement. So by moving, like by struggling is that we learn. So the first thing you see is what's happening in your backyard, or in your paycheck, or or when you're on the street and somebody doesn't stop stalking you. Like, that is the immediate start for all of us. At some point, there was something that was like, this is not okay. And then you start maybe organizing and mobilizing and doing stuff, and then you join with people, and you're like, oh, actually, there's something else behind it. Oh, wait, there's a company, and then there's like, oh, there's an entire like, there's this colonial, history of like 500 years. So, but that happens as you So that politicization pipeline happens through movement. And it happens to all movements, right? Because a lot of, like, I talked to Andreas Malm, and he's so frustrated because the stuff that we are saying now, they used to say in 2009, literally word by word. And it's like, and I understand because, and I think this is really, really important because we did lose, in this century, we did lose memory. So movement information is not going from one wave to another wave. It's not carried over. And that is an infrastructure that we don't have. Previously, we had that a bit better. Eventually, you could say, even in the 90s, you could say in the media was holding it to some extent. But like, now we really don't have a way, like a new generation of people that just show up, don't know where to look for lessons learned. And this is why we decided to make the last part of the book as a website where we can collect that kind of stuff and also like give visibility to this kind of learning, and also like insist that people have to be intentional about learning. Not just like, oh, I learned something and we move on. No. You have to report back. And like very specifically report back exactly what you tried, in what exact context, and how much of it is transposable elsewhere and whatnot. So yeah, so this is what my reaction is to what you said. It has nothing to do with climate movement, I know. I just want to start closing by saying some trivial logistical stuff, if that's okay. Is there anything that anybody would like to add before I do that kind of stuff? Wrapping up kind of stuff. So I will just do that. All right. So there's a book. Voila. The stuff that I want to say, which I realized are not that obvious in some contexts, and I actually took note of these things, so let me just see. So the book comes from a talk that we gave, I think 30 to 40 times, in 2022 and 23 or something like that. So there was a group of speakers that would just travel around or do online sessions and so on, and then eventually we realized that's not a good way of following up then afterwards, because people forget that's a lot of information and so on. So Marianne and I myself wrote a book, but there's a team of people, of 6 to 8 people, depending on whether you count people in jail as part of the team, which is a bit of a trick. All of these people are volunteers, and there's zero funding for this project. This is entire militancy. I have another job. This is my like extracurricular activities. So this is what I do in the time that I save, and that applies to all of the people. And just for you to get a sense of what I'm talking about, we organized more than 50 events in 27 countries since the launch, and that was in February. So like 7 months. So this is what we're doing. We are like, when we say we have to do this, we are actually like, yeah, we have to do this, and we're just gonna do that. So I'm giving you that sense, and the book is self-published. So basically, the entire design and all of that was kind of handled by, and the distribution. All of that is kind of designed around whatever, like zero budget kind of organizing in general. So that goes to kind of amend how Aurora opened, which is to say the book does not have a price. There is a price on the website because there are commercial reasons and tax issues and whatever, like the self-publication platform puts a price. The ones that I brought, they don't have a price. The information is that if you would give 10 euros, then it's possible that we cover the costs of like so far, right? So that is the information, and you can just leave whatever you want, right? And there's all this logistics of whether you want to do it over your phone or whatever, which I don't understand at all. So just to say that, because it also happens a lot that we go to places and we just give out books because we find the perfect organizer from Mauritius, and I'm like, you have to read this book. I don't care if you just have to read this book. I don't have time for you not to read this book because if you read actually, this is another anecdotal note, but like, if you actually look at what they are doing in Mauritius, it's ridiculous. They keep on doing revolution every second year. And anyway. So it's like, I was saying because I was like, then you have to come back and teach me what the hell you guys are doing there. So yeah, there are situations where you just like give away because that makes more sense. Politically, that's the right choice. So yeah, there are some copies here and there. And I think that's all. Do we have any other... Does XR Finland want to say something to people as hosts in terms of like how to follow up from here with you? So you You have to put your recruitment hat. Come on. Who's going to do that? Say something.
Yeah, that can go back to... yeah, I took yours. Yeah, thanks so much for everyone, and Sinan, of course. I think this was like a wonderful conversation, and we should continue this. There are like some occasions when we meet like outside of movements, but there should definitely be more of those. And if someone else wants to organize the next like discussion between movements, I'm sure that XR Elokapina will join with big numbers. And yeah, if you have like any thoughts or feedback to us, we will gladly take it and also forward it if it's something in regards to that. Does anyone have something like very more like hype type of thing? Yes. Great. Yeah, there's tomorrow is a workshop. It's more in the context of like XR. So if you are interested in that, you can come to me, and you can of course join, but it will be more like from Elokapina's point of view. But still, I think it will be very cool.
It's a work. It's not a public event. So talk to Aurora for follow-up and like get sense of like whether it's the right place to be. I will be here tomorrow afternoon, evening. If somebody wants to have a follow-up to this, just have a coffee or beer or wine or whatever you drink in Finland. So I can create some space for that. Also Sunday early in the morning if you are an early bird. So you can also follow up directly with me or talk about it's a workshop, and we have to see if that is the right place for you to be. So it's not just. Thanks a lot, and thanks a lot for the invitation and all of that and organizing. Cheers.